My husband didn't slam the door. He didn't shout. He came home quietly and stood in the living room like he belonged there, like nothing in this house could ever really be taken from him. "We need to talk," he said. I muted the TV. "Okay." He stayed standing, hands loose at his sides. No pacing, no agitation. That calm, controlled stillness that men use when they believe they already have leverage. "I've been thinking about our future," he said, "about what I need." His eyes stayed on me, steady, assessing. "I need security, real security." I breathed out slowly. "We have security. The house is paid off. The business is strong." He nodded once. "Your business, your house, everything is in your name." That line wasn't new. He'd been repeating versions of it for months. Never loudly, always precisely. Like he was building a case. "I've supported you for 12 years, he continued. "I managed this household. I put my career on hold." I didn't interrupt. I could feel where this was going. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "I want my name on the house." "You want me to add you to the deed?" "No." His jaw tightened slightly. "I want you to sign it over to me, completely." The room felt smaller. "Tonight?" I asked. "Yes." "And if I don't?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his head slightly toward the hallway. 2 suitcases stood by the front door. His, packed neatly, zipped, final. "Then I'm leaving tonight," he said calmly, "and I'll take half of everything in the divorce anyway. This just makes it simpler." There was no drama in his voice, no threat, just certainty. I looked at the bags, at how prepared he was, at how rehearsed this moment felt. This wasn't an argument. It was a script. I stood. "Let me get a pen," I said. For the first time, something like satisfaction crossed his face, not excitement, validation. I walked to my office. I didn't grab a pen. I grabbed the folder I'd kept locked away for 3 weeks. When I handed it to him, his expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then fear. Divorce papers. Behind them, 42 pages of surveillance photos, hotel records, timestamps, and proof of the life he'd been living with another woman. His bags were already packed, just not for the future he thought he was walking into. When I met my husband, I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for momentum. I had just poured everything I had into a landscaping business that barely qualified as one. Me, an aging compact work van with peeling paint and a lawnmower I'd borrowed from a neighbor who didn't think I'd last the season. The van rattled when I turned too sharply. The air conditioning worked only when it felt like it. My hands were always sore. My clothes permanently smelled like grass and fertilizer. Most nights, I fell asleep replaying numbers in my head, wondering how long I could keep going before something broke. Me, the van, or the fragile illusion that this could turn into a real life. He came into it quietly. Not as a client, not as a rescuer, just present. We met through mutual friends at a small dinner. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. He listened, asked questions that weren't performative. When I talked about work, he didn't recoil from the long hours or the uncertainty. He said he admired it. Admiration feels dangerously close to love when you're exhausted. We took our time. Coffee dates that turned into dinners. Evenings that didn't feel rushed. He liked that I was focused, that I had direction, and I liked that he didn't compete with it. At least that's what I thought. When we married, the business was still fragile, but gaining traction. I already owned the house. Small, modest as something I'd bought early because I needed stability. I paid it down aggressively whenever I had a good month. That house wasn't luxury, it was safety. He moved in without hesitation. The early years felt cooperative. He slipped easily into managing the household. Errands, meals, routines. He worked part-time at a boutique for a while, then quit after conflicts with his boss. I didn't push. I told myself marriages weren't about measuring contribution in neat columns. When he stopped working entirely, I adjusted again. I told myself it was temporary, that once things stabilized, he'd figure out his next step. He talked about ideas, vague plans, someday projects. I listened, encouraged, waited. Years passed. The business didn't just survive, it expanded. Contracts grew, employees were hired, equipment replaced the old van. 14 people eventually relied on me to make payroll decisions correctly. 3 years ago, I paid off the house completely. I didn't tell anyone until the paperwork was finalized. I needed it to be real before I allowed myself to feel proud. He congratulated me, but something shifted after that. It started quietly, comments framed as jokes. "Must be nice." "Guess I'm just living in your house," I reassured him, offered to add him to accounts. Told him we were building something together, even if the paperwork had my name on it. Every time he declined. Too complicated, he'd say, or, what's the point? I trust you. I believed him. What I didn't see was how resentment grows when it's watered daily but never spoken aloud. How admiration turns brittle when one person keeps moving forward and the other stays still. How someone can smile at your success while privately preparing to claim it. We didn't have children. That was his choice. He never wanted them. After enough conversations that ended nowhere, I accepted it. I told myself love meant compromise, that families could take many forms. I thought our life was stable, predictable, safe. I didn't know that while I was building contracts and schedules and futures, he was building something else entirely, quietly, deliberately, one lie at a time. So when he stood in front of me with that ultimatum, it wasn't sudden. It was simply the moment all those unspoken calculations finally surfaced. The first signs didn't arrive as red flags. They came disguised as reasonable questions, casual observations, things a spouse was allowed to wonder out loud. It started with paperwork. He'd sit beside me at the kitchen table while I reviewed contracts or invoices, pretending to scroll through his phone while actually watching the screen in front of me. "Do you ever worry," he asked one night, "about what would happen to me if something happened to you?" I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, shrugging lightly, "everything's in your name. The house, the business. If you got sick or died." It was framed as concern, responsibility, even love. I reassured him, told him there were contingencies, insurance, wills that could be updated if needed. I asked if he was anxious. "No," he said quickly, "just thinking ahead." That phrase started showing up a lot. Thinking ahead. A few weeks later, he asked why the house was still only in my name. "You've been meaning to add me," he said, not accusing, reminding. "You said you would, eventually." I reminded him that I'd offered multiple times, that he'd declined. "Because it didn't feel urgent then," he replied. "It does now." That was new. Then there were the jokes. "Careful," he said once when friends came over and complimented the house. "She might charge me rent." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But later, alone, I felt something twist in my chest. The comments kept coming, always half smiles, always in front of others, always just plausible enough that calling them out would make me look sensitive. He started asking more questions about the business, how contracts worked, how much revenue certain jobs brought in, what would happen if I sold, what the business was worth, theoretically. I answered without thinking. I had nothing to hide. He listened too closely. One night while we were in bed, he said, "You know, in a marriage, assets are supposed to be shared." "They are," I said. "We share our life." "That's not what I mean." I turned toward him. "Then what do you mean?" He stared at the ceiling. "I mean legal security." That word again. Security. I suggested couples counseling, not because things felt broken, but because something felt misaligned, like we were standing on different versions of the same ground. He brushed it off. "We don't need therapy," he said. "We need clarity." Clarity apparently looked like paperwork. Around the same time, he started going out more. Book club, he said. A new group he'd joined. Discussions, wine, socializing. He dressed differently for it, sharper, more intentional. Not wrong, just unexpected. He'd come home late, energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. When I asked about the books, his answers were vague. He talked around plots, repeated titles. Once I noticed he'd been reading the same novel for months. I told myself not to be suspicious. Marriage isn't a crime scene. You don't dust it for fingerprints every time something feels off. Still, my instincts began whispering. He stopped asking if I'd add him to accounts. He started asking when. And when I hesitated, when I said we should talk things through properly, his tone cooled. "I just don't understand why you're resisting this," he said one night. "If you trust me." That sentence stayed with me, because trust had never required an ultimatum before. By then, the business was thriving. The house was paid off. On the outside, our life looked solid. But inside, something had shifted. The questions weren't about love anymore. They were about leverage, and I didn't yet know how far he was willing to go to get it. The night it finally broke didn't feel explosive at first. It felt staged. It was a Tuesday evening. Ordinary. Predictable. I was in the living room, half watching television, half answering emails on my phone. Payroll questions, a supplier follow-up, things that required just enough attention to keep my brain engaged, but not enough to feel present. I heard the door open. He didn't call out, didn't announce himself. I looked up and immediately noticed how he was dressed. Not casual, not comfortable. He looked like he was heading to a cocktail party. Tailored jacket, carefully chosen shoes, hair styled with intention. It didn't match book club. It didn't match a Tuesday. He stood in the doorway for a moment, arms crossed, watching me like he was measuring something. "We need to talk," he said. I muted the TV. "Okay." He didn't sit. He stayed standing, blocking nothing, threatening nothing, just occupying the space like he'd already decided how this would end. "I've been thinking about our future," he said, "about what I need." The phrasing felt familiar, rehearsed. "I need security," he continued, "real security." I kept my voice steady. "We have security. The house is paid off. The business is stable." He nodded. "Your business? Your house. Everything is in your name." There it was again. "This isn't new," I said carefully. "We've talked about this." "And nothing has changed," he replied. "That's the problem." I waited. "I want you to sign the house over to me," he said, completely. The words landed cleanly. No hesitation. No softening. I actually laughed. Once, sharply, before I could stop myself. "You want me to give you the house I bought before we were married?" I asked. "The one I paid off with my income?" "It's only fair," he said. "I supported you for 12 years. I managed this household. I put my career on hold." His career, the part-time job he quit 8 years ago, the plans he never followed through on. "And if I say no?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the hallway light and flicked it on. 2 suitcases stood by the front door. His. Packed, zipped, ready. "Then I'm leaving tonight," he said calmly. "And I'll take half of everything in the divorce anyway, so you might as well make this easy." I stared at the bags. The certainty. The timing. This wasn't an emotional reaction. It wasn't desperation. It was a plan. I looked back at him. "You already packed." He didn't deny it. "This isn't a negotiation," he said. "It's reality." Something inside me settled. Not broke. Settled. Like a piece clicking into place. "Let me get a pen," I said. His shoulders loosened just slightly. Relief, maybe. Or victory. I walked to my home office. I didn't grab a pen. I grabbed the manila folder that had been sitting in my locked desk drawer for 3 weeks. When I came back, he was scrolling on his phone, probably ready to message someone the good news. "Here," I said, handing him the folder. He opened it expecting a deed transfer. Instead, he found divorce papers. Behind them, 42 pages of surveillance reports, photos, hotel entries, timestamps, receipts, a documented timeline of 14 months. I watched his face change. Confusion. Recognition. Fear. "How?" he whispered. "Your story didn't add up," I said quietly. "You were reading the same book for 4 months." He flipped through the pages, hands shaking. Photos of him entering hotels, leaving apartments, holding another woman's hand. Credit card records. Gifts purchased with our money. "This is illegal," he said weakly. "No," I replied. "It's evidence." "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself from someone who planned to leave me for another woman while trying to take my house on the way out." His mouth opened, closed. "I can explain a—" "You really can't." I pointed toward the door. "Your bags are already packed," I said. "Use them." He tried tears then. Real ones. Shaking voice. Apologies layered over excuses. They didn't move me. I'd spent 3 weeks looking at proof of a life he'd been living without me. The performance was over. At the door, he turned back. "You're going to regret this," he said. "You're going to try," I replied. He left. I locked the door behind him. Then I sat on the couch and stared at the wall, heart pounding, for a long time. 12 years. And it ended not with a conversation, but with an ultimatum that failed. The house didn't feel quiet after he left. It felt hollow. I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it for a moment, listening to my own breathing like it belonged to someone else. Too fast. Too shallow. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from the delayed impact of holding myself together for too long. Then I walked back into the living room and sat down. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I just stared at the wall, letting the minutes stretch without shape or purpose. The TV screen had gone dark. My phone buzzed once with an incoming email I didn't read. Time moved, but I didn't feel it passing. 12 years. That number kept circling in my head like it needed somewhere to land. 12 years of routines, of shared jokes, of quiet nights that I'd mistaken for peace. And it ended not with a conversation, not with counseling or compromise, but with a rehearsed ultimatum and packed bags that had been waiting by the door before a single word was spoken. I'd known for 3 weeks. That was the part no one ever sees from the outside. 3 weeks of smiling across the dinner table. 3 weeks of watching him get dressed for book club, listening to him narrate his day like it was harmless. 3 weeks of knowing my marriage was a performance. and realizing I was the only one still playing my role. The hardest part wasn't discovering the affair. It was pretending I hadn't. The night I got the first batch of photos from the private investigator, I didn't go inside the house right away. I sat in my car in the driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. I remember staring at the dashboard, telling myself not to scream, not to drive off, not to confront him before I had everything. I'd called my lawyer instead. She was calm, methodical, clear. "Don't confront him yet," she said. "Not until you have all the evidence. Don't give him time to delete messages, move money, or rewrite the narrative. Build your case first, then act." So I waited. And waiting was brutal. Every laugh felt like a lie. Every touch felt borrowed. Every casual "I love you" landed like something counterfeit. I started noticing details I'd ignored before. The way he angled his phone away from me, how his energy shifted when he came home late, how easily he talked about a future he clearly wasn't planning to stay in. I watched him prepare to leave me while pretending everything was normal. And somehow, he never noticed that I'd gone quiet. After he walked out that night, the reality finally settled in. Not grief. Not yet. What I felt first was clarity. The ultimatum made everything sharp. It stripped away doubt, nostalgia, and the temptation to rewrite history in his favor. He hadn't stumbled into betrayal. He'd planned it. He hadn't asked for fairness. He'd demanded control. I stood up and walked through the house slowly. Our house. I opened drawers, closets, cabinets. I noticed what was missing and what wasn't. He'd taken clothes, toiletries, personal items, nothing sentimental, nothing shared, like someone already halfway detached from the life he was leaving behind. In the bathroom, I saw his toothbrush still in the holder. I threw it away. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I forwarded every voicemail, every text, every message from his family that had already started coming in, missed calls, accusations, shock dressed up as concern. I sent everything to my lawyer without responding to a single one. I wasn't engaging. I was documenting. That night, I slept on my side of the bed, out of habit. Sometime near morning, I woke up and realized the space beside me was empty. Not temporarily, not for the night, permanently. And for the first time since the truth came out, I let myself feel it. Not the loss of him. The loss of what I thought my life was. The entitlement didn't wait. It arrived the very next morning. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. Missed calls, voicemails, stacked on top of each other like accusations waiting to be heard. I didn't answer. I already knew who it was. His mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message was nearly 20 minutes long. Her voice rose and fell like a siren. How I was cruel, vindictive, how I was throwing away 12 years over nothing, how I had humiliated her son, how I was heartless for locking him out with no warning. No warning. As if the photos of him with another woman didn't exist. As if the packed suitcases by the door had been a coincidence. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to my lawyer. Then came the text from his sister. "You're really doing this over a mistake?" He was unhappy. "That's on you. Real partners fight for their marriage." I didn't respond. I screenshotted everything and sent it to my lawyer instead. She replied with one sentence. "Good. Keep documenting." I had hired her the week I received the first PI report. She was expensive, sharp, and absolutely worth it. When we went over the facts together, she didn't sugarcoat anything. "The house is yours," she said. "Purchased before marriage, paid off with separate funds. That's clear." That part was a relief. "The business is more complicated," she continued. "You started it before marriage, but it grew significantly during. He can claim a portion of the appreciation." "How much?" I asked. 20 to 30%, depending on how sympathetic a judge feels. And then the part that stung the most. "Spousal support is likely. 12 years of marriage. He hasn't worked in 8. Even with the affair, this is a no-fault state." I stared at her. "So I pay him to cheat on me." She didn't flinch. "You pay because the law doesn't care why a marriage ends. It only cares about dependency." I nodded. I hated it, but I understood it. Then came the first dirty move. His lawyer sent a letter claiming I had forcibly removed him from the marital home and denied him access to his belongings. They demanded emergency access. I hadn't removed him. He had walked out on his own 2 feet. Still, I agreed to a supervised retrieval. My lawyer present, his lawyer present. Scheduled for Saturday morning. He showed up with a moving truck. Not a car. A full-size moving truck. "What is this?" I asked, stunned. "I'm getting my belongings," he said flatly. "Your clothes and personal items," I replied, "not the furniture." His lawyer stepped in. My client has a right to marital property. The furniture was purchased before marriage, I said. I have receipts. And I did. Every one of them. The TV, bought years before we met. The couch, the dining table, even the bed frame. The only thing he'd contributed to was a dining set, and that too had been purchased with my credit card, one he was authorized to use. After 2 humiliating hours, the moving truck left nearly empty. 6 boxes. Clothes, shoes, personal items. Nothing else. This isn't over, he said as he left. I know, I answered. 2 days later, the police showed up at my door. He'd filed a report claiming I was harassing him with threatening text messages. I'd sent exactly 2 texts since he left. 1. Please have your lawyer contact my lawyer for any divorce-related communication. 2. Saturday at 10 a.m. works for property retrieval. The officers looked at each other after reading them. Ma'am, we have to follow up on reports, one said, clearly irritated. I understand, I replied, handing them my lawyer's card. They left. My lawyer added it to the file. Pattern of false accusations, she noted. Judges don't like this. 3 weeks later, discovery revealed the real damage. He'd been siphoning money, not from our joint account. That would have been obvious, but from a credit card in my name that he was authorized to use. Small cash advances, $200, $300, spread out over months. 14 months, over $8,000. The ATM locations told the story, near hotels, near restaurants, near her apartment. He'd been funding the affair with money he was quietly taking from our marriage. There was more. His affair partner was married too. Separated technically, still legally married, living apart while working things out. His wife had no idea about my husband. I considered reaching out. I didn't. Not my marriage, not my responsibility. Then his demands escalated. His lawyer submitted a list. The house, 50% of the business, $4,200 a month in spousal support, legal fees paid by me, the car, in my name, and a $75,000 lump sum for marital contribution. My lawyer laughed. Not kindly. She's starting high to negotiate down, she said, but this is ambitious. We countered. House stays mine. 15% of business appreciation over 3 years, $1,800 a month for 2 years. Each party pays their own legal fees. He keeps the car. No lump sum. He rejected it immediately. Then his brother showed up at my business. Walked straight into my office while I was meeting with a major client. We need to talk, he said. I stepped outside, apologized to my client, and closed the door behind me. This is inappropriate, I said. He made a mistake, his brother snapped. You're destroying him over it. He had a 14-month affair, stole money from me, and tried to take my house, I replied. That's not a mistake, that's a plan. He stepped closer. You're going to regret this. I pulled out my phone. Say that again. He left. Then his mother called my mother. My mom listened patiently, then said, maybe your son shouldn't have slept with another woman for over a year while married to my daughter. Click. Mediation was scheduled for the following month. My lawyer warned me to prepare for a fight. I was already in one. The darkest part wasn't the betrayal. It was what came after, when the noise finally quieted enough for doubt to move in. After the police left that night, I locked the door and slid down against it, sitting on the floor like my legs had simply given up. The house felt different now, not empty, exposed, like every wall had been listening, waiting to decide whether I deserved to be here alone. I knew I'd done nothing wrong. I also knew how quickly truth becomes slippery once lawyers, paperwork, and narratives get involved. That was the first night I slept with my phone on my chest, volume turned all the way up. Every sound startled me. Every unfamiliar car passing the house made my heart spike. I hated that. Hated how easily vigilance replaced peace. I started questioning myself in the quiet moments. Had I pushed too hard? Had I missed something obvious years ago? Had I been selfish without realizing it? The thoughts didn't come all at once. They arrived gently, like reasonable questions, and that made them more dangerous. I replayed our marriage in reverse. Arguments, compromises, decisions I'd framed as teamwork. I wondered if I'd mistaken his stillness for support, his absence for trust. I wondered if my success had slowly made me unlovable without my noticing. That scared me more than the affair, because betrayal has a villain. Self-doubt turns you into one. Work stopped being a refuge. I still showed up, still made payroll, still met with clients, but my focus slipped. I'd find myself staring at emails without absorbing a word, my mind drifting back to courtrooms I hadn't entered yet and judgments that hadn't been made. I started avoiding people. Friends reached out. My family checked in. I answered with polite reassurances that felt rehearsed even to me. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want advice. Mostly, I didn't want to explain something that still felt unreal when I said it out loud. At night, the house was the worst. Every creak sounded intentional. Every memory ambushed me. His shoes by the door, his mug in the cabinet, the way he used to sit at the counter while I cooked. I caught myself setting out 2 plates once, then froze, staring at the extra one like it had betrayed me too. I put it back and stood there longer than necessary, breathing through the tightness in my chest. The voicemail from his mother replayed in my head more than I wanted to admit. Cruel, vindictive, heartless. Those words have weight when enough people repeat them. For the first time since this started, I wondered if the system would punish me for standing my ground. If a judge would see a woman with assets and decide I'd been cold, calculating, unfeeling. If all the documentation in the world would still crumble under the story he was trying to tell. That fear sat heavy in my stomach. One night I opened the PI report again. I hadn't looked at it in days. I flipped through the photos slowly, forcing myself to see them, not as evidence, not as strategy, but as truth. Him holding another woman's hand, him smiling in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in years, him entering hotel rooms while I'd been at home, assuming. The anger didn't come. What came instead was grief, quiet, aching, exhausting. Not for him, for the version of myself who trusted without reservation. I closed the folder and pressed my palms flat against the table, grounding myself in the present. The wood felt solid, real, something that wouldn't rewrite itself when the story got uncomfortable. That was when I realized something important. The darkest moment wasn't about losing him. It was about standing alone in the space where certainty used to live, about accepting that no matter how right I was, this process would still hurt. That being truthful wouldn't spare me from being questioned. That integrity doesn't come with guarantees, only boundaries. I went to bed that night exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. But beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, something else was there too. Resolve. Thin, quiet, unimpressive, but unbroken. And I held on to that because I knew if I let it go, there wouldn't be anything left to fight with when the truth finally had to stand on its own. The turning point didn't come with a revelation. There were no new photos, no sudden confession, no dramatic interruption that changed everything in an instant. It came with a room, a table, and the slow exposure of truth under fluorescent lights. Mediation was scheduled for the following month. The conference room at the courthouse was too cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you aware of every breath you take. I sat beside my lawyer, hands folded, posture straight, reminding myself to stay present. Across the table, my husband sat with his lawyer, looking different than he had at home. Smaller, thinner, carefully curated. He wore modest clothes, no watch, no jewelry, except for one thing. His wedding ring, still on. That detail hit harder than I expected. The mediator entered, gave the standard speech about compromise, about finding common ground. She sounded tired, like someone who had seen too many versions of the same story and no longer believed in any of them. His lawyer spoke first. My client has been deeply traumatized by this process, she said smoothly. He was forced from the marital home with nothing but the clothes he packed himself. I felt my jaw tighten, my lawyer interrupted calmly. He left voluntarily. He packed his bags before issuing an ultimatum. The mediator raised a hand. Let's focus on what can actually be divided. And then it began. We went through everything. The house, the business, the timeline. His lawyer argued that he'd sacrificed his career to support mine, that he'd managed the household so I could build my company. What career? My lawyer asked. He worked part-time retail for 2 years over a decade ago. The mediator flipped through the documents in front of her. Then my lawyer slid the PI report across the table. 42 pages. Photos, dates, credit card statements, ATM withdrawals, hotel stays. The mediator didn't react outwardly, but her eyes slowed as she read. This complicates your client's position, she said to his lawyer. For the first time, my husband spoke. I made a mistake, he said quietly, but that doesn't erase 12 years of marriage. No, I replied, but it explains why you tried to get me to sign over the house before you walked out. He looked at me sharply. That's not... Your bags were packed, I said. Her apartment was ready. You had a plan. The only part you didn't account for was me already knowing. Silence filled the room. The mediation dragged on for 4 hours. 4 hours of numbers, percentages, hypotheticals. 4 hours of being told what a judge might do, what they could decide if they were sympathetic, if they believed certain narratives. My lawyer leaned toward me at one point and spoke softly. Trials are expensive, unpredictable. Even with strong evidence, you're gambling. Sometimes the smartest move is choosing the outcome you can control. I hated that she was right. In the end, we settled. Not because it was fair, because it was survivable. The house remained mine. That was non-negotiable. Purchased before marriage, paid off with my money. The law was clear. He received 20% of the business's appreciation during the marriage, paid over 4 years. I didn't like it, but my lawyer reminded me a judge could have given him more. Spousal support, $200 a month for 3 years. Time limited. No indefinite dependency. He kept the car, his personal belongings, about $3,000 from his personal account. The $8,000 he'd siphoned through credit card cash advances was deducted from his settlement. Advanced distribution, my lawyer called it. His lawyer tried one last thing. My client requests that the private investigator's report be sealed. No, my lawyer said. It's relevant. It stays. We signed the papers. When it was over, I felt nothing. Not relief, not victory, just exhaustion. In the parking lot, he caught up to me. Are you happy now? He asked. Happy isn't the word, I said. I gave you 12 years. You gave me 12 years I believed in, I replied. The last 14 months were a lie. He tried one last excuse, loneliness, neglect, feeling invisible. I listened. Then I said, if you were lonely, you could have talked to me. Instead, you cheated and tried to take my house. He had no answer. As I walked away, something finally shifted. Not the past, my power. For the first time since this started, I knew the truth didn't just exist on paper. It had been acknowledged. And that changed everything. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces: paperwork, deposits, silence. Each one landing with a dull weight that reminded me this wasn't over just because the mediation had ended. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. No courtroom drama, no final speech, just signatures, filings, and a judge who glanced at the settlement like it was one of hundreds crossing their desk that month. I stood there, answered the required questions, and walked out legally single after 12 years of marriage. I mailed the first quarterly payment for the business settlement the following week. Writing that check hurt, but not the way I expected. It wasn't rage or grief. It was the irritation of paying for something already finished. It's just money, my lawyer had said. You'll make more. She was right. The spousal support was set up as automatic transfer. First of the month, every month. I didn't watch it process. I didn't need to. I knew it would go through whether I acknowledged it or not. The house felt different after that. Not haunted. Reclaimed. I started small. Took down the photos lining the hallway. The ones where we smiled at the camera like nothing was wrong. Packed them into a box I didn't label and slid it to the back of a closet. I repainted the bedroom. He'd chosen the original color. I hadn't realized how much I hated it until it was gone. The only things he left behind were a hairbrush in the bathroom drawer and expired vitamins in the kitchen cabinet. I threw both away without ceremony. Work steadied me. The business didn't suffer. If anything, it improved. I was focused again. Present. Decisions came faster without the low-grade anxiety of living with someone who was quietly working against me. Clients renewed contracts. New ones came in. Life continued. His family did not. I blocked them all. His mother, his sister, his brother. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain. I simply removed them from my life like I would any other ongoing disturbance. My family, on the other hand, showed up quietly. My mother called every Sunday. Never pried, never offered advice unless I asked, just checked in. My brother came over one weekend to watch football. We didn't talk about the divorce. We didn't need to. Small things mattered more than big speeches. I wasn't okay. Not fully. There were moments, standing in line at the grocery store, folding laundry, unlocking the front door, when I forgot, just for a second, that he was gone. I'd expect to hear his voice from another room. Then I'd remember. And the loss would hit again, sharp and familiar. The hardest part wasn't the cheating. It was what it did to my memories. Every good moment now came with an asterisk. Our wedding, anniversaries, trips we took where he said he'd never been happier. I found myself asking questions I'd never get answers to. Was any of it real? Did he ever love me? Or was I always just convenient? That doubt was heavier than anger. I learned later, through the PI, who kept tabs as a courtesy, that his affair partner's wife had found out. Someone had tipped her off. She filed for divorce too. And him? He'd decided my husband was too much drama. The apartment he'd been preparing to move into never became his home. He was staying with his parents, 48 years old, sleeping in his childhood bedroom, living off a settlement that would barely cover rent once the payments ended. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just distance. In the parking lot after mediation, he'd asked if I was happy. I thought about that question a lot afterward. Happy wasn't the goal. Stable was. Safe was. Truthful was. Some nights, the house felt too quiet. Other nights, the silence felt like peace. I learned to tell the difference. I stopped questioning my decisions. The ultimatum replayed in my mind sometimes. Sign the house over to me, or I'm leaving tonight. He thought he had all the power. He hadn't counted on me already knowing the truth. He hadn't counted on evidence. He hadn't counted on consequences. And that miscalculation followed him out the door. The house is quiet now. Not the uneasy quiet of waiting, but the settled kind. The kind that exists when nothing is being hidden anymore. I rearranged the living room last month, moved the couch away from the wall where we used to sit together in the evenings. I didn't do it for symbolism. I did it because the space finally felt like mine to shape. Some mornings I wake up before my alarm and lie there listening to the stillness. For years, I thought silence meant something was wrong. Now I understand it can also mean peace. I'm not healed. Not completely. 12 years doesn't disappear just because the paperwork is finished. There are moments when a memory surfaces uninvited, his laugh, a shared joke, the rhythm of a life I thought I knew. When that happens, I don't push it away. I let it pass through, unedited, and then I let it go. The hardest truth wasn't that he cheated. It was that betrayal doesn't announce itself as evil. It arrives disguised as entitlement, as quiet resentment, as someone slowly convincing themselves they deserve what they never earned. He thought power came from leverage, from threats, from ultimatums, from believing I would panic when cornered. What he didn't understand was that the moment he issued that ultimatum, he gave me clarity. And clarity is a form of power. I didn't win because I was ruthless. I didn't win because I was strategic. I won because I refused to surrender reality in exchange for comfort. I kept the house. I kept the business. But more importantly, I kept my sense of self intact when it would have been easier to bargain it away. Some people leave marriages with apologies. Some leave with assets. Some leave with stories they tell themselves to avoid accountability. He left with exactly what he'd earned, no more, no less. As for me, I'm rebuilding something quieter now. Not a life built on proving anything, but one grounded in boundaries and truth. I no longer confuse love with sacrifice that goes unreciprocated. I no longer mistake stability for loyalty. The night he said, "Sign the house over to me or I'm leaving," he believed fear would make me fold. Instead, it showed me who I was standing across from. And once you truly see someone, you can't unsee them. That's the lesson I carry forward. Not every ending is loud. Some are precise. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone walk away without giving them what they came to take. Thank you to everyone who stayed through this story. If you've been in a situation where your boundaries were tested, know this: clarity is not cruelty, it's self-respect. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts, your experiences, or your own lessons in the comments.